Today I'm going to be talking about my two favorite comedy shows of all time. That 80s Show and Sean Saves the World. Yeah. Now that Parks and Recreation is over, the debate can finally be answered between what's better between Parks and Recreation and The Office, even though I think that a lot of people made up their mind a long time ago. Parks and Recreation had 7 seasons while The Office had 9. A lot of people think that they prolonged The Office a little bit too much there. And a lot of people say that Parks and Recreation ended on top. So, which one is better? Let's start at the beginning. Both shows had a little bit of a rocky start in the first season, with The Office being too much compared to the original British Office, and Parks being too much compared to the US version of The Office. Looking back on them, I think both seasons are fine. They're not as good as the rest of the seasons, but they're both fine. I'd give the edge to The Office because it has a little bit more of its own voice, even though the Michael Scott character is quite annoying in the season 1. You got Jim and Pam, and that's there, and it's building, and it just builds throughout season 2. While Parks, Leslie is a nice character. Ron doesn't really come into his own till season 2, and neither does Tom, and especially Andy, because Andy is just a flat-out jerk in season 1, and he only gets about 2 minutes of screen time each episode. I will say both season 1s have one really huge breakout episode, with The Office being the basketball episode, and Parks being the rock show episode, the very last episode of season 1. That's when the show gets really good, both shows. Moving on to season 2, and we all know that The Office season 2 is when the show really comes to its own, with that very first Dundies episode where they humanize the Michael Scott character and make him a lot more likable. Then especially a few episodes later in the Halloween episode, it almost brings you to tears by the end of it. As well as Parks. Leslie is way more developed, Ron is way more developed, Andy gets a lot more screen time, and as does Ann. We also bring in 2 new characters in Chris Traeger and Ben White, and they kind of make the show what it is, I think. I still have to give the edge to season 2 of The Office because that is just a powerful force of TV comedy and drama. This season is a flawless season, and I'm not taking anything away from Parks. It's a good season of Parks and Recreation. It's probably the second worst season because it's so consistent from there on out. But season 2 of The Office is flawless. You care about Jim and Pam. You care about Michael Scott. You care about these relationships, and you care about what's happening in The Office. There always seem to be bigger themes going on in The Office, while Parks always seem to be more feel-good, with the characters being more likable. You'd want to hang out with the characters of Parks more than you want to hang out with the characters of The Office. That doesn't mean you like watching them more, though. The Office's characters are a little bit more deep, and the themes were always just a little bit more deep than Parks and Recreation's. Now, season 3, I can't really change my answer here. Season 3 of The Office is equal to season 2 of The Office. Those are the elite years of The Office, season 2 and 3. I'd put that against like any season of anything, even Breaking Bad. I know it's hard to compare the two because Breaking Bad is just a crime drama force, and The Office is kind of silly with a lot of emotion. Season 3 of Parks and Recreation is really super good because you get the more developed Chris Traeger and Ben White characters, because they were only in 2 episodes in season 2. I didn't mention that before. But you get that flu season episode, which is a fan favorite, and it's quite possibly my favorite episode of the whole entire series. Season 3 of Parks and Recreation is super good. Now this is when the debate gets really interesting, because season 4 of Parks and Recreation, I think, is the best season. And it just, from then on out, it's just consistent city. I mean, season 4 of Parks is just like 3 of my favorite episodes. Maybe 4 or 5 of my favorite episodes of Parks is in season 4. And the last 3 episodes of Parks and Recreation are 3 of the best episodes I've ever seen of anything ever, The Office, season 4, it's fine. It's fine. It's not as good as season 3. You had the writer's strike going on, and you had longer episodes, which isn't a bad thing. You had hour-long episodes, and you still care about it. There's just not as big of themes happening because, Jim and Pam, they have gotten together. They got together. And a lot of people think that brings the show down, and they get a lot more boring, but I've always been into their relationship. I've always, that sounded really weird, but yeah. I'm going to combine a couple seasons now to move this along, and I think that Parks and Recreation season 5 and 6 is actually probably better than season 5 and 6 of The Office. But The Office has some really big emotional moments. I've always said that it's the more emotional show, where I've cried on Parks a few times. The Office I've cried probably way too many times. Sorry, I can't help it. It's just that's the way the show is. It's not as entertaining as Parks, but it was always a little bit deeper and more emotional. You got the Michael Scott Paper Company storyline in season 5, which was actually one of the best storylines in the entire series. It happens towards the end of season 5, though. Now, up until then, you don't have a lot of story arcs happening, but you have the Holly Flack storyline, whereas she leaves Michael, and it's Michael's love interest, and he's just broken up about it, and that weighs on the series until Michael leaves the show, and it's a big part of it. And a lot of people complain that season 6 doesn't have a lot of stuff on the line. There's not a lot of stuff being put out there. It's just kind of just entertainment, and that's a little bit true. A lot of people, but you know, I feel like Parks is always like that. Parks just does it a little bit better than The Office. Parks is a more entertaining show than The Office, and it shows in season 4, 5, and 6, and we'll talk about the final seasons here in just a little bit. Now we come to Parks and Recreation's final season, which just ended like the other day. And The Office, you know, season 7 isn't the final season, but it is Michael Scott's final season, which a lot of people think the show should have ended there. Right, if we're comparing the big finales of Parks and Recreation and Michael Scott's big finale, which one had more emotion? I can't lie, whenever I watched the Parks and Recreation finale the first time, I wasn't feeling it because it wasn't what I wanted initially. I just wanted an episode of Parks and Recreation, and what they did was kind of bigger than that, and it took a little bit for me to appreciate it. I've watched it 3 times since then, and I think it's just beautiful, and it does make me tear up at the end. You got Michael Scott's big send-off here, which sort of is a long thing. It happens through the course of like 5 or 6 episodes. And when you find out he's going to leave, it's a very big emotional scene when you find out he's going to leave. There's just a lot of amazing things that happen in the course of that. You got the Dundies Part 2, you got Threat Level Midnight, and then you do have the big send-off. And the big send-off is beautiful, especially the last moment between Jim and Michael, and the last moment between Michael and Pam. But you got this Will Ferrell character that's just not good. It almost ruins the episode, I think. Whenever I think about the episode, I like to just cut him out of my mind because he almost ruins like beautiful moments. Whereas Parks and Recreation, the 7th and final season, was so good, like borderline perfect, like way better than I expected it to be. They skipped ahead 3 years, and I wasn't sure how they were going to pull it off. They pulled it off with flying colors by bringing in a little storyline through half of the season with a big rivalry between Leslie and Ron. And the way that is resolved, that specific storyline is beautiful, and it's one of the best episodes of Parks and Recreation. Then halfway through the season, you don't have much story arc, which concerned me towards the end, because like there's nothing to really care about here at the end. And it showed in the Johnny Karate episode, which is an episode I didn't like as much as other people. I compared it to Threat Level Midnight in season 7 of The Office, and I like that episode way more. But the way they did that at the end, I can't think of any other show that's a comedic sitcom show that did what they did to show us, give us so much insight on what happened to the characters. Didn't leave a lot of room for imagination, which I didn't like at first. But I watch it now and I'm like, isn't this what everybody wants really when they see their final episode of one of their favorite shows? Don't they want to see these things? Moving on to the dark years of The Office, the years that a lot of people hate and a lot of people complain about. I like them. I like them. I don't think they're necessarily as good as the other seasons, but the way they bring the cast together right off the bat in season 8, you know, there's a lot of touching stuff in season 8 until the end. Yeah, like the end sucks. The end of season 8 is horrible. Robert California is not a good character. He has good lines, but he's not a good character. Season 9 comes out better. Season 9 comes out better. And they ruin it a little bit with making Andy a mean, disgusting, horrible character. The way they write him off whenever you film The Hangover 3, they could have done a much better job. It was just awful. Like, no emotion. The way that you was rooting for Andy and Aaron, they crap on that, really. And it's something that I feel strongly about because I like The Office so much and I hate to see stuff like that handled that way. The last 3 or 4 episodes of season 9 I think they're like flawless. Even though a lot of people complain about the Andy stuff at the end, I found it entertaining. And the way that the Office ended was so good. It was like an epilogue, you know, sort of like the Parks and Recreation finale, but more so just them hanging out and just having really, really beautiful moments where they kind of, I don't think they forced emotion on you. I think they just put the emotion in you in the finale of The Office. A lot more emotional lines than the Parks finale. Whereas Parks was a little bit more silly and just a fun, good time up until the end when it does get very emotional. The Office finale consistently, like, let's say the second half of the finale, you know, it's an hour-long episode. The second half just fills you with a lot of emotion, and they bring back Michael Scott, obviously. And it's from that point on when if you're a huge fan of the show, it's hard to keep yourself from tearing up while smiling. There's a lot of beautiful stuff at the end of that. Andy has a great line, Daryl has a great line, Pam has quite possibly the most profound line of the entire series, you know? So, both finales are really, really good. So which show is better? It's tough. It's not something that is easy to answer, you know? You got Parks is a show that if it came on TV, I'd probably rather watch than The Office. But The Office is a show that I'd rather sit down and follow all the way through than Parks, because it did have bigger themes, and it probably helped me through a little bit more tough times when I was a little bit younger. Whereas Parks, you know, it did help me through tough times, but it was just such a feel-good show and such a positive show, and it shows in that finale. I'm not saying The Office wasn't a positive show, but it had a little bit of a darker edge to it, with a little bit of meaner characters. And it just depends on what you're into. They're both, I think, the two best comedy shows of all time, I think. When it comes to that sweetness mixed with comedy, mixed with, you know, heartache, these shows are the best. There's nothing better, and it's hard to say which one is better. That's why I made this long video, and it's up for you to decide, you know. I prefer The Office, I think. I'm not sure. Parks just ended, you know. I've been watching the last season of The Office for like 2 years now, you know, and 2 years from now I might feel differently, because Parks is so good. Such rich characters, such amazing characters, such heartfelt characters, characters that you'd like to hang out with, you know, whereas The Office is a little bit more mean, a little bit more nasty characters that say funny things, you know. Yeah, it's a tough one, but I give the edge to The Office. Let me know which show you like more. I know that a lot of people like Parks and Recreation more. That's why I said at the beginning of the video. A lot of people decide they like Parks and Recreation like years ago more than The Office. But let me know what you think and what show you think is better. Thanks for watching.